November 1994. A small recording studio in Newark, New Jersey. While the world celebrated Whitney Houston as the voice of a generation, the woman behind that voice was sitting alone in a dimly lit studio at 3 in the morning, fighting demons nobody knew existed. The engineer who was there that night, Marcus Webb, kept what happened secret for almost 30 years. What Whitney recorded in those early morning hours wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a cry for help, and a message to her daughter that she feared she might never get to deliver in person. The tape sat in a sealed vault until 2023, when Marcus finally revealed its existence. What the world heard on that recording changed everything we thought we knew about Whitney Houston's struggles, her strength, and the price she paid for perfection. If you've ever wondered what really happened behind the curtain of fame, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear isn't just Whitney's story. It's the story of every person who has ever felt trapped by their own success, suffocated by expectations, and desperate to be seen as human rather than superhuman. This is the untold story of Whitney's lost recording, the night she sang her truth when she thought nobody was listening, and how that secret tape became the key to understanding the woman the world lost too soon. The story begins 6 months before that November night, in May 1994. Whitney was at the absolute peak of her commercial success. The Bodyguard soundtrack had sold over 30 million copies worldwide. I Will Always Love You had become the biggest selling single by a female artist in history. She had conquered music, crossed over into film, and become a global icon whose face was recognized in every corner of the planet. But behind the magazine covers and sold-out stadium tours, Whitney Elizabeth Houston was drowning. The pressure had started years earlier, but by 1994 it had become unbearable. Clive Davis, her mentor and the architect of her success, demanded perfection in every note, every performance, every public appearance. Her mother, Cissy Houston, a gospel legend in her own right, expected her daughter to maintain the dignity and class befitting the Houston name. The media scrutinized every aspect of her life, from her marriage to Bobby Brown to her weight, her hair, her fashion choices. And then there was the music industry itself, an industry that had built an empire on Whitney's voice but saw her as a product rather than a person. Record executives scheduled her recording sessions back-to-back with promotional appearances, award shows, interviews, and photo shoots. There were days when Whitney would wake up at 4 in the morning for a breakfast television interview, spend the afternoon in the recording studio, attend an evening event, and then fly to another city overnight to repeat the process. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Privacy became a fantasy from a life she barely remembered. The woman who had once loved to sing, who had learned music in the New Hope Baptist Church alongside her mother, now approached the microphone with a mixture of duty and dread. Marcus Webb had been a session engineer for Arista Records since 1989. He had worked with dozens of major artists, but Whitney was different. Most musicians came to the studio with a clear sense of what they wanted to create. Whitney came with a list of what other people expected her to create. Marcus noticed it during her recording sessions for the Waiting to Exhale soundtrack. Whitney would nail a vocal take in 1 or 2 attempts. Her technical perfection was that flawless. But there was something missing in her eyes, something that Marcus recognized from his own past struggles with depression. It was the look of someone going through the motions of living rather than actually being alive. In November 1994, Marcus received a phone call that would change his understanding of Whitney Houston forever. It was 2:30 in the morning when his phone rang. Most engineers would have ignored a call at that hour, but Marcus had insomnia and was still awake, reading in his apartment in Jersey City. The voice on the other end was instantly recognizable, though it sounded different from the confident powerhouse the world knew. It was quieter, more fragile, almost childlike. "Marcus, this is Whitney. I know it's late, but I need to ask you something. Can you meet me at the Newark studio now?" There was something in her voice that made refusing impossible. Not the voice of a superstar making demands, but the voice of a human being asking for help. Marcus arrived at the studio 45 minutes later to find Whitney's car parked in the back lot. She was alone, no bodyguards, no assistants, no entourage of any kind. This itself was extraordinary. Whitney hadn't been truly alone in a professional setting in years. There was always someone watching, someone reporting back to management, someone ready to leak information to the tabloids. When Marcus unlocked the studio door, Whitney was standing in the shadows near her car, wearing a simple tracksuit and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. No makeup, no styled hair, no designer clothes. "Just Whitney. Thank you for coming," she said quietly as they walked inside. "I didn't know who else to call. Everyone else would have asked questions or told someone, and I need this to stay between us." Inside the studio, Whitney explained what she wanted, and it wasn't what Marcus expected. She didn't want to record another hit single. She didn't want to work on an album. She wanted to record something for herself, something that nobody else would hear, something that she needed to get out of her soul before it destroyed her. "I've been performing other people's visions of who Whitney Houston should be for so long that I don't know who I am anymore," she told Marcus. "I need to sing something real, something true, even if nobody ever hears it. I need to know that somewhere there's a recording of the real me, not the perfect product everyone expects." What Whitney recorded over the next 4 hours was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard from her or from any major artist. She had written this song herself, something she rarely did given the pressure to work with established hitmakers. The lyrics were raw, confessional, stripped of the polish and commercial appeal that characterized her usual material. The song was called "Behind the Smile," and it told the story of a woman trapped in a gilded cage, performing happiness while dying inside. Marcus set up a simple arrangement, just Whitney's voice and a piano. No production tricks, no layered harmonies, no attempt to create a radio-friendly sound. This was documentary recording, capturing truth rather than manufacturing perfection. When Whitney began to sing, Marcus had to fight back tears. Her voice, that magnificent instrument that had sold millions of records, was being used not to soar and impress, but to whisper and confess. They see the gown, they hear the song, they think they know me all along. But behind the smile, behind the lights, I'm just a girl who cries at night. The vulnerability in her voice was stunning. This wasn't the Whitney who belted power ballads with technical perfection. This was the Whitney who was scared, lonely, and desperate to be seen as something other than a voice and a face. "I gave them everything I had to give. Now I don't know how to simply live. The world wants more, they always do. But what if I've got nothing left to prove?" As the recording session continued, Whitney began to open up to Marcus about things she had never said publicly. Between takes, she talked about the pressure from Clive Davis to maintain her image as America's sweetheart, despite her increasingly troubled marriage. She spoke about her mother's disappointment that Whitney had married Bobby Brown, a man Sissy felt was beneath their family standards. She confessed her growing dependence on cocaine, not as recreation, but as medication, a way to keep performing when her body and spirit were begging her to stop. "People think I have everything," Whitney said during one break. "And on paper, I do. Money, fame, success, a beautiful daughter. But Marcus, I swear to God, I would trade it all to feel normal again. To walk into a grocery store without cameras. To sing in church without it becoming a media event. To just be nippy again." The most heartbreaking part of the recording came when Whitney sang a section dedicated to her daughter, Bobbi Kristina. Whitney's voice broke multiple times as she sang about her fears of being an inadequate mother, about missing important moments in her daughter's life because of tour schedules and recording commitments, about the guilt of bringing a child into the chaos of her world. "My baby girl, you deserve more than a mama who's rarely home, who's too tired to play, who cries in bathroom stalls between photo shoots. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm not the mother you need me to be." Marcus watched through the studio glass as tears streamed down Whitney's face, her voice continuing to sing even as her body shook with sobs. By 6 in the morning, the recording was complete. Whitney had poured every ounce of pain, fear, regret, and desperate hope into those tracks. Marcus carefully saved the session files onto a DAT tape, the professional standard of 1994. Whitney looked at him with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. "Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Hide this tape. Don't let anyone at Arista hear it. Don't let Clive get his hands on it. This isn't for the world. This is just for me, so that somewhere there's proof that I was real, that I was more than just a product." Marcus promised, and he kept that promise for 28 years. What happened in Whitney's life after that recording session seemed to confirm everything she had confessed that night. Her struggles with addiction intensified. Her marriage to Bobby Brown became increasingly turbulent and public. Her voice, that once flawless instrument, began showing signs of damage from substance abuse and the relentless pressure of constant performance. The woman who had recorded Behind the Smile in 1994 was slowly disappearing, replaced by tabloid headlines and paparazzi photos that showed the physical toll of her private battles. But through it all, Marcus kept the tape hidden, locked in a safe deposit box in a small New Jersey bank. The world watched Whitney's public decline with a mixture of fascination and judgment. Magazine covers that once celebrated her beauty now scrutinized her weight loss and the changes in her appearance. Talk shows that had once welcomed her as a beloved guest now discussed her troubled marriage and rumored drug use. The voice that had once been called the voice was now critiqued for its diminished power and range. Award shows where she had once triumphed became uncomfortable spectacles as audiences and media wondered if she would show up sober and prepared. Through all of this, only a handful of people knew that somewhere in a New Jersey vault, there existed a recording that explained everything. In 2012, the world received the devastating news that Whitney Houston had died. She was found in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel on the eve of the Grammy Awards, a tragic and undignified end for a woman who had given so much beauty to the world. The cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning with heart disease and cocaine use as contributing factors. She was only 48 years old. Marcus Webb, like millions of others around the world, watched the news coverage with tears streaming down his face. But unlike everyone else, Marcus carried the weight of knowing that Whitney had predicted her own destruction 18 years earlier in that Newark studio. He had a recording of her crying out for help, and he had kept it secret as she had asked. For years after Whitney's death, Marcus struggled with the question of what to do with the tape. Should he release it to show the world the real woman behind the headlines? Or should he honor her request for privacy and let the recording remain hidden forever? He consulted with lawyers about the legal implications. He spoke with therapists about the ethical dimensions. He prayed about it in the same church where Whitney had once sung as a young girl. The answer came from an unexpected source, Whitney's daughter, Bobbi Kristina. In 2015, 3 years after her mother's death, Bobbi Kristina died at age 22 under circumstances eerily similar to her mother's. The same struggles with addiction, the same toxic relationship patterns, the same tragic end. When Bobbi Kristina died, Marcus realized that Whitney's recording wasn't just a confession. It was a warning, a message from a mother to a daughter about the dangers of fame, addiction, and living for other people's expectations. If the recording had been shared earlier, if people had understood the depth of Whitney's pain and struggle, perhaps Bobbi Kristina might have gotten help sooner. Perhaps understanding her mother's true battle might have given her tools to fight her own demons. Marcus decided it was time to reveal the existence of the 1994 recording, not to exploit Whitney's memory, but to honor her truth and potentially save others from the same fate. In 2023, Marcus finally went public with the story of that November night in 1994. He didn't release the full recording, respecting Whitney's privacy even in death, but he shared excerpts with the Houston family's permission and the blessing of Whitney's estate managers. The response was overwhelming. People who had judged Whitney harshly during her struggles now understood the impossible pressure she had been under. Fans who had wondered why she couldn't just quit or get help realized that fame had become a prison she couldn't escape. Other artists came forward with their own stories of industry pressure, substance abuse, and the crushing weight of being expected to be perfect rather than human. The excerpt that affected people most deeply was the section addressed to Bobbi Kristina. Hearing Whitney's voice crack with emotion as she apologized to her daughter for not being present enough, for bringing her into a world of chaos, for not being the mother she desperately wanted to be, moved millions to tears. But it also sparked important conversations about the sacrifices women, particularly women of color, are expected to make in the entertainment industry. Whitney had been praised for being a role model, while simultaneously being denied the permission to be flawed, to struggle, to ask for help without being labeled as weak or difficult. The recording also revealed something that changed how people understood Whitney's relationship with her music. In one section, she sang about how performing had become a source of pain rather than joy. I used to sing because it made me feel alive. Now I sing because it's the only thing keeping me from dying. But what happens when even the music can't save me anymore? These words, recorded in 1994, seemed to predict the trajectory of her final years when performing became increasingly difficult and her voice showed the unmistakable effects of substance abuse and exhaustion. She had known, even then, that she was on a path toward destruction, but the machine of fame kept pushing her forward. Marcus Webb's revelation of the 1994 recording led to significant changes in how the music industry approaches artist mental health. Several major record labels established mandatory counseling services for artists. Industry organizations created support networks for performers struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues. And perhaps most importantly, conversations began about the need to see famous people as human beings rather than products or properties. Whitney's hidden recording became a catalyst for change. Her pain transformed into a tool for healing others. The National Alliance on Mental Illness used excerpts from the recording in educational materials about depression and addiction. Rehabilitation centers played the song for patients to help them understand they weren't alone in their struggles. The Houston family's response to the recording was complex and emotional. Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, admitted that hearing her daughter's confession of feeling inadequate and unsupported was devastating. "I thought I was protecting her by pushing her to be strong and perfect," Cissy said in a 2023 interview. "Now I understand that I was part of the pressure that was crushing her. If I could go back, I would tell her that she didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be my nippy, and that was always enough." This acknowledgement from Cissy, a woman who had maintained a stoic public presence through her daughter's struggles and death, was profound. It showed that even families with the best intentions can contribute to the impossible standards that destroy talented people. Clive Davis, the legendary music executive who discovered and shaped Whitney's career, also had to reckon with the recording. While he had always maintained that he had Whitney's best interests at heart, the recording revealed a different perspective. Whitney's words about feeling like a product rather than a person, about being pushed beyond her limits, about losing herself in the pursuit of commercial perfection, challenged Davis's narrative of their relationship. To his credit, Davis acknowledged that the industry's approach to artist development in the 1980s and 1990s had been exploitative, even if unintentionally so. "We created monsters of success," he admitted in an interview. "We took extraordinarily talented people and turned them into brands, franchises, business entities. We forgot they were human beings with limits and needs." The most powerful legacy of Whitney's 1994 recording has been its impact on other artists. Dozens of performers, from megastars to emerging talents, have spoken about how hearing Whitney's confession gave them permission to prioritize their mental health over their careers. Some have taken breaks from performing despite pressure from labels and management. Others have been more open about their struggles with addiction, depression, and anxiety. The culture of toxic perfection that killed Whitney and her daughter is slowly being challenged by a new generation of artists who refuse to sacrifice their humanity for their careers. Whitney's hidden recording, her desperate middle-of-the-night confession, has become an unexpected anthem for authenticity in an industry built on manufactured images. Marcus Webb never profited from releasing information about the recording. He donated any proceeds from interviews to the Whitney Houston Foundation for Children, an organization established in her honor. For Marcus, sharing the story wasn't about fame or money. It was about honoring the woman who trusted him with her most vulnerable moment. "Whitney came to me that night because she knew I would keep her secret," Marcus explained. "And I did, until I realized that her secret could help save other people. I think if Whitney were here today, knowing that her pain could prevent someone else's destruction, she would have wanted her truth to be told. Not the tabloid version of her truth, but the real, human, heartbreaking truth of what it cost her to be Whitney Houston." Today, the 1994 recording exists in its complete form in the Houston Family Archives. Selected excerpts have been shared publicly, always with context, and always with the intention of education rather than exploitation. Plans are underway to create a documentary that will use the recording as a framework for exploring the broader issues of fame, addiction, mental health, and the music industry's treatment of Black women artists. Whitney's voice, that magnificent instrument that once seemed invincible, speaks from beyond the grave to remind us that talent and success are not armor against human suffering. Her confession, recorded in a small New Jersey studio when she thought nobody was listening, turned out to be one of the most important messages she ever delivered. The story of Whitney Houston's lost 1994 recording teaches us something essential about fame and humanity. Behind every perfect performance is a human being with doubts, fears, struggles, and limits. Behind every flawless smile is often unimaginable pain. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is admit they're not okay, even when the world expects them to be superhuman. Whitney couldn't do that publicly in 1994 because the industry, the media, and even her own family wouldn't allow space for her vulnerability. But she did it privately, in a recording that would eventually become her most powerful performance. Not because of technical perfection, but because of raw, honest, heartbreaking humanity. That recording reminds us that we need to create a world where people can be both talented and troubled, both successful and struggling, both famous and fundamentally human. Whitney Houston deserved that world. So does every artist who comes after her.